Most business courses are not education, they are hope packaged as strategy. They sell the fantasy that capitalism is a puzzle and that the missing piece is information. It is not. The missing pieces are usually timing, leverage, social access, risk tolerance, capital, obsession, luck, and the ability to survive humiliation longer than normal people can. The scam is not always that the teacher knows nothing. The deeper scam is that they sell transferable certainty in a game built on uncertainty. A real business is war disguised as service. Customers do not care about your dream. Markets do not care about your mindset. Money does not move toward passion. Money moves toward power, pain, convenience, status, addiction, fear, or desire. Most courses teach the aesthetics of entrepreneurship, not entrepreneurship. They teach logos, funnels, personal brands, productivity rituals, morning routines, and fake clarity. They train people to look like founders before they have learned how to bleed like operators. The ancient priest sold salvation. The modern guru sells financial rebirth. Same structure, different costume. Confession becomes coaching. Scripture becomes framework. Tithing becomes investment in yourself. The student is not really buying knowledge. He is buying permission to believe he is different. That is why the industry works. It feeds the ego while pretending to discipline it. It tells the average person, you are not failing because reality is brutal. You are failing because you have not found the right system yet. Beautiful lie, profitable lie. The truth is colder. Most people do not need another course. They need contact with the market. They need rejection. They need to sell something ugly, get ignored, fix it, sell again, and repeat until their fantasy dies or becomes skill. Business cannot be downloaded into the brain. It must be burned into the nervous system. The course seller understands human weakness better than the buyer understands business. That is the whole business model. 90% are scams because they monetize the gap between who people are and who they fantasize they could become. They sell identity before competence. They sell confidence before evidence. They sell maps to people who are afraid to enter the jungle. And the darkest part is this: many buyers prefer the scam. Because buying a course feels like action without requiring exposure. It feels like ambition without the risk of public failure. It lets the ego say, I'm building, while the body remains safe. Modern capitalism does not only sell products, it sells self-image. Business courses are mirrors dressed as ladders. Most people do not want truth. They want a believable ritual that delays it.
The course industry survives because it discovered something terrifying about modern people. Confusion is exhausting, not physical exhaustion, existential exhaustion. The kind that appears when someone wakes up at 28 or 34 or 41 and realizes they have spent years following instructions designed by systems that never intended to make them free. Go to school, get credentials, be realistic, work harder, stay employable, consume carefully, retire eventually. Then one day, the economy changes, the company restructures, the salary stagnates, the meaning disappears. And suddenly the human being is left alone with a question no institution prepared him for. What exactly am I doing with my life? That question creates psychological hunger, and hungry people are easy to sell to, not because they are stupid, because they are desperate for orientation. The business guru enters at exactly that moment, not as a teacher, as emotional relief. He speaks with certainty in a civilization collapsing under ambiguity. He speaks in clean steps to people drowning in complexity. He gives names to invisible fears, mindset, limiting beliefs, wealth consciousness, high-value skills, financial freedom. And humans love language that transforms chaos into narrative, even if the narrative is false, especially if the narrative is false, because reality is emotionally expensive. Real business is mostly boredom, uncertainty, awkward conversations, delayed gratification, invisible stress, repetitive failure, self-doubt, and constant adaptation. But the human ego hates gradual transformation. It wants cinematic transformation. The course promises rebirth in chapters. Reality offers reconstruction through humiliation. So people choose the course, not always consciously. Sometimes the purchase itself becomes emotional anesthesia, a temporary suspension of inadequacy. For a few hours after buying, the person feels movement again. Hope returns. Identity expands. The future feels negotiable. Then the feeling fades. So they buy another framework, another mentor, another blueprint, another promise. Modern capitalism learned something religion understood centuries ago. People will pay endlessly to avoid feeling powerless. That is why so many course creators accidentally become cult leaders. Not because they plan to, because human beings naturally gather around confidence when they feel psychologically lost. And the internet intensified this weakness beyond anything in history. For most of human existence, people compared themselves to neighbors. Now they compare themselves to curated illusions generated by millions of strangers simultaneously. A 19-year-old sees a teenager claiming to make $200,000 a month. A man with debt watches clips of entrepreneurs flying private jets. A woman working 2 jobs sees influencers describing passive income while sitting beside infinity pools in Dubai. The nervous system cannot fully distinguish between observation and participation. So people absorb the emotional pressure of lifestyles they never consented to compete against. This creates silent shame. And shame is one of the most profitable emotions on earth. Because ashamed people become psychologically vulnerable to anyone selling transformation. The deeper tragedy is that many course sellers were once victims themselves. That is what makes the system so psychologically fascinating. A failed dream becomes a monetized identity. Someone struggles for years trying to build a real business. It fails, the market rejects it, customers disappear. Then they discover something strange. Teaching success is often more profitable than achieving it, so the person slowly shifts from operator to performer. At first, they exaggerate a little, then they simplify reality. Then they start speaking in absolutes because certainty converts better than honesty. Eventually, they no longer remember the difference between their real life and their online mythology. This is not just manipulation, it is self-preservation. Because once thousands of people see you as successful, admitting confusion becomes economically dangerous. So the performance continues, and audiences cooperate with the illusion because modern society rewards appearance faster than substance. The algorithm does not ask, "Is this person wise?" It asks, "Can this person hold attention?" Those are very different questions. Humanity is entering an era where visibility and credibility are becoming disconnected, a dangerous era. Because humans instinctively associate confidence with competence. But some of the loudest people online are simply individuals who became emotionally comfortable speaking without doubt. Silence looks weak on the internet. Nuance looks weak. Humility looks weak. Uncertainty looks weak. Yet reality itself is uncertain. That is the irony. The wisest people often speak carefully because they understand complexity. The most dangerous people speak clearly because they do not. And exhausted humans choose clarity over truth far more often than they admit. But eventually, something happens to people who spend years chasing financial salvation through external systems. Fatigue, not laziness, existential fatigue. A quiet realization begins to emerge. No amount of optimization is removing the emptiness. Because the emptiness was never purely financial, money solves many physical problems. That part is true. Poverty, romanticized, is still suffering. Financial instability destroys nervous systems, relationships, health, dignity. But modern people quietly expect money to solve emotional confusion too. It cannot. A millionaire can still feel unnecessary. A founder can still feel hollow. An influencer can still feel invisible. A successful entrepreneur can still wake up unable to explain why his victories feel emotionally weightless. Because humans do not only need achievement, they need coherence, a reason their life feels internally connected. And many people lose that coherence chasing identities they never truly wanted. That is why some people secretly feel calmer after failing. Failure removes performance. It destroys illusion. It forces confrontation, painful confrontation, but real. Some people spend years trying to become rich before realizing what they actually wanted was autonomy, or respect, or rest, or safety, or love, or proof they mattered. Money became symbolic, a substitute language for emotional needs they could not articulate. And this is where the entire conversation changes, because after all the cynicism, after all the manipulation, after all the scams and psychological exploitation, something honest still remains underneath human ambition. Most people are not greedy. Most people are frightened of insignificance, frightened of dependency, frightened of wasted potential, frightened of being forgotten, frightened that their life will disappear without meaning. So they chase signals that promise escape, status, money, followers, freedom, success, not realizing that a human being can spend an entire lifetime escaping insecurity without ever learning how to feel alive. And maybe that is the real lesson hidden underneath the scam economy. Not that humans are foolish, that humans are emotionally starving in a civilization overflowing with stimulation but lacking depth. People do not only need information, they need grounding. Something real enough to survive silence, because eventually the noise fades, the gurus fade, the trends collapse, the algorithms move on, the frameworks expire, and a person is left alone with himself again. No audience, no branding, no performance, just the quiet question underneath everything. Was I actually living? Or was I only trying to become someone the world would finally approve of? Then the question is no longer, what is wrong with the world? The question becomes, how do you remain human inside it? Because once illusion breaks, a person reaches a dangerous crossroads. Some become cynical. Some become numb. Some become addicted to detachment. Some stop trusting everything. Some hide inside irony because sincerity feels vulnerable. Some chase money harder than ever because fear disguised itself as ambition. But awareness alone does not save a human being. Awareness without direction can become paralysis, so the real work begins after disillusionment, not in escaping society, in learning how to stand inside it without surrendering your mind. The first principle is this: do not build your identity around external reactions. This sounds simple until you understand how deeply most people are controlled by invisible audiences. They choose careers for approval, opinions for safety, personalities for acceptance, lifestyles for perception. Even emotions become performances. A person can become so adapted to observation that they no longer know what they actually feel when nobody is watching. That is psychological slavery. And the escape is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. That is another form of dependence. Real freedom is quieter. It is the ability to make decisions that still feel correct, even when they do not increase status. Especially then, because self-respect is built in private, not public. A human being should learn to ask, if nobody could applaud this decision, would I still make it? That question cuts through enormous amounts of illusion. The second principle, do not worship money. But do not romanticize struggling either. Both extremes destroy people. Money matters because survival matters. Security matters. Freedom matters. The ability to protect people you love matters. But once money becomes your emotional compass, your inner world becomes permanently unstable, because there will always be someone richer, always someone younger, always someone scaling faster, always another mountain. A person who ties his worth to financial comparison enters a game with no psychological finish line. He becomes externally successful and internally restless. The goal is not to avoid ambition. The goal is to make ambition serve life instead of replacing it. There's a difference between using money as a tool and using it as evidence that you deserve existence. One creates stability, the other creates addiction. The third principle, protect your attention like your life depends on it. Because psychologically, it does. Modern systems are competing to colonize human consciousness itself. Every notification trains interruption. Every algorithm studies weakness. Every platform profits from emotional agitation. And humans underestimate how much fragmented attention slowly damages identity. A distracted person becomes easier to manipulate, easier to exhaust, easier to define externally. Silence is no longer normal. Stillness is no longer normal. Depth is no longer normal. That should concern people more than it does, because a human being cannot hear his real thoughts over constant stimulation, and eventually he loses contact with his own instincts. Some of the strongest people alive are not louder than everyone else. They are simply less contaminated. They can sit alone without needing noise. They can think without panic. They can exist without constant digital sedation. That is power now. The fourth principle: stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. This destroys enormous amounts of human energy. Many people are exhausted not because life is impossible, but because they are trying to earn emotional permission to exist from parents, from strangers, from old friends, from audiences, from people who only understand them through outdated versions of themselves. Not everyone will understand your changes. That is normal. Growth often looks offensive to people attached to your previous identity. You do not need universal approval to live truthfully. You need alignment. There is a difference. The fifth principle: do not become emotionally cold in the process of becoming strong. This happens constantly. People get betrayed once, so they stop trusting entirely. They get embarrassed once, so they stop expressing themselves honestly. They get hurt once, so they turn detachment into personality. But emotional numbness is not wisdom. It is armor that stayed on too long. A person can become so focused on avoiding pain that they accidentally avoid life itself. Real strength keeps the heart operational, not naive, not dependent, not fragile, operational. Still capable of love, still capable of wonder, still capable of grief, still capable of sincerity in a civilization addicted to performance. That matters more than people realize, because many successful people are not actually at peace. They are defended. There is a difference. The sixth principle: choose a few things worth suffering for. Not everything deserves your life force. Modern people are overwhelmed partly because they are psychologically connected to everything simultaneously. Every crisis, every trend, every outrage, every comparison. The nervous system was not designed for this volume of emotional exposure, so choose carefully. A few real relationships, a few meaningful goals, a few responsibilities that genuinely matter. Depth matters more than volume. A calm dinner with someone who truly sees you can become more spiritually important than a year of networking. 1 hour of focused work can matter more than 10 hours of anxious performance. One honest conversation can change a life more than 1,000 motivational clips. Humans heal through reality, not stimulation. And maybe the most important principle is this: stop treating life as a constant evaluation. Most people are unconsciously waiting for permission to finally feel enough. Enough money, enough beauty, enough success, enough proof. Then they will allow themselves peace. But life does not announce arrival. There is no final scoreboard where existence suddenly becomes justified. There is only the ongoing experience of being alive. And many people miss it completely because they are too busy trying to become impressive. Look carefully at modern exhaustion. It is not always caused by hard work. Often it comes from maintaining identities that do not fit the soul anymore. That is why honesty feels so relieving, not because truth is always pleasant, because falsehood is heavy. Eventually, a person understands something the world rarely teaches clearly. A meaningful life is not built by constantly maximizing yourself. It is built by becoming internally coherent. When your values, actions, relationships, ambitions, and inner world stop fighting each other. That coherence creates a kind of peace success alone cannot produce. And in the end, the strongest people are usually not the most admired. They are the ones who can still recognize themselves after years inside a culture designed to fragment identity. They can still sit quietly without escaping themselves. Still love without performance. Still work without worshiping status. Still dream without becoming consumed by comparison. Still exist without needing to constantly prove existence. That is rare now. A person who achieves that may not dominate the world, but he will possess something far more difficult to buy back once lost, his own mind. And maybe that is the closest thing to freedom human beings will ever find.